Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Tech Forum session. I'm Kalpana Patel, Product Coordinator at BookNet. Welcome to Breaking the Mold, Crowdfunding for Publishing Projects. Before we get started, BookNet Canada acknowledges that its operations are remote and our colleagues contribute their work from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wyandot, the Mi'kmaq, the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation, the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and the Métis, the original nations and peoples of the lands we now call Beaton, Brampton, Guelph, Halifax, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Vaughan, and Windsor. We encourage you to visit the nativeland.ca website to learn more about the peoples whose land you are joining from today. Moreover, BookNet endorses the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and supports an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space making in the book industry. The book industry has long been an industry of gatekeeping. Anyone who works at any stage of the book supply chain carries a responsibility to serve readers by publishing, promoting, and supplying works that represent the wide extent of human experiences and identities in all that complicated intersectionality. We at BookNet are committed to working with our partners in the industry as we move towards a framework that supports space making, which ensures that marginalized creators and professionals all have the opportunity to contribute, work, and lead. For our webinar today, if you are having difficulties with Zoom or have any tech-related questions, please feel free to post them in the chat or email us at techforum@booknetcanada.ca. We're providing live ASL and closed captioning for this presentation. To see the captions, please find the Show Captions button in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. If during the presentations you have any questions for us, please use the Q&A panel found in the bottom menu. Lastly, we'd like to remind attendees of the Code of Conduct. Please do be kind, be inclusive, be respectful of others, including of their privacy, be aware of your words and actions, and please report any violations to techforum@booknetcanada.ca. Do not harass speakers, hosts, or attendees or record these sessions. We have a zero tolerance policy. You can find the entire code of conduct at bnctechforum.ca/code-of-conduct. Now let me introduce our speakers. Oriana Leckert is the head of publishing at Kickstarter, where she helps creators bring a marvelous array of literary projects to life. She's written and edited for Vice, MTV News, Slate, Hyperallergic, Gothamus, Atlas Obscura, and many more. Her first book, Brooklyn Spaces, 50 Hubs of Culture and Creativity, published by Monticelli in 2015, grew out of a multi-year project chronicling the rise and fall of under-the-radar creative places across New York City. Over her 2-decade career, Kim Werker has written or co-authored 7 books about crafts and creativity, edited countless nonfiction books on a wide variety of topics, founded, run, and sold an online crochet magazine, and spoke and taught at conferences across North America. In 2020, she co-founded 910 Publications, publishing Canadian books about art, craft, and creativity. Kim lives in Vancouver, BC, where she reads avidly, weaves, and dreams of her next road trip. Over to you, Oriana and Kim.
That was an incredible introductory remarks. I feel like you are slowing me down just from hearing you speak, which we've already discussed is something I need to work on. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope I can emulate your pacing and emphasis. I guess I will start with my presentation and then we will move over to Kim after that. So this is Kickstarter 101. This is information I've been delivering for a long time in a slightly new deck. So forgiveness if I stumble at all, but I think I know what I'm doing. So here is me. I'm Oriana Leckert. I'm the head of publishing at Kickstarter. I will not read all of these previous roles, some of which were already read in my bio, but these are some of the things that I've done and the work that I bring to this role. So here's the things that we will go over in this presentation. What is Kickstarter? Some stats and information about Kickstarter publishing, basics of running a campaign, how to find your crowd, and then some platform trends. For starters, what is Kickstarter? Which I will say slowly because I love this whole gift situation and I want you to see such a large number of our very incredible creators. Look at that. So good. That's Brandon Sanderson, the number one highest funded project of all time. Okay, I'll move on. Some of the things that make Kickstarter unique in the crowdfunding landscape. Kickstarter's entire mission is to bring creative projects to life. We believe in that so strongly that everything we do comes back to that. And in fact, the company reincorporated as a public benefit corporation about 10 years ago. I didn't know what that was before I came to work here, but it is a fairly strict legal and business charter that requires us to make sure that everything we do comes back to that mission, which is bringing creative projects to life. Kickstarter's funding model is all or nothing. That means if you set out to raise $5,000 and you only raise $2,000, you don't get any of that money. People tend to think that that's scary at first glance, but it was actually designed that way with artists and creators in mind. The idea is that during the course of the campaign, you're going to make a lot of promises about what you'll make, what it will look like, how many pages, your trim size, your rewards, etc. And if you come to the end and you haven't raised all of the money that you really need to bring that work to life, you're actually in a very bad spot. You're going to either have to self-fund to make up the difference, produce an inferior product, or maybe not fulfill it all. So our goal is that nobody should be required to bring their project to life with an incomplete budget. Another thing I think is really important about Kickstarter is that we give you your audience. This is kind of baked into Kickstarter's DNA and is not a reaction to the sort of like the way the world has evolved, particularly social media and other book selling sites where it's very opaque and difficult to know who your supporters are and where they are and why. Kickstarter shares a tremendous amount of demographic information during and after your campaign about what time of day people are backing, what sort of devices they're using, what of your promotional links have led them back to the page. And then after the project is over, you get everybody's email addresses. You get to send surveys to find out more about people, add them to your mailing list if you want to. So we're really all about collapsing those boundaries between you and the people who support you. Finally, Kickstarter's fee is 5%. This is an industry setting standard that we've never raised our rates. We take 5% only of successful campaigns. So if you run a project and it doesn't reach its goal, you don't owe anybody any money. And our payment processor, Stripe, they take a 3 to 4% variable. So if you budget 10% for fees, you will be more than covered and you'll be paying much less than most of the other places through which you can sell books online. Here are some numbers. Oh no, my Zoom is covering some of these. Here we go. In Kickstarter's history, more than 268,000 projects have been funded. $8 billion have been pledged from 24 million individual backers. Oh, yes. And now I will move on to specifically Kickstarter publishing. Also by the numbers, 68,000 projects launched, 3.2 million backers and counting. We're getting close to $400 million pledged toward publishing campaigns. And for projects that reach at least 25 backers, the success rate for running a publishing campaign is 84%. It's one of the highest across the site. Why would you do this? What are the benefits of Kickstarter for publishers? I will go through each of these individually with some case studies, but the sort of big ideas, you're able to offset rising costs, test out ambitious ideas, connect directly with your community, your readers, your supporters, uplift marginalized voices, demystify the publishing process, and create something new with your existing IP. So here's my case study for offsetting rising costs. Very venerable publisher Verso, primarily in the UK, but with a US office as well. Their distribution company abruptly declared bankruptcy earlier this year, which happened. A number of other distribution companies have done so. This was the biggest, and it left the company pretty tremendously in the lurch. To my knowledge, Verso has never done any crowdfunding before. And so they came to me and said, can you help us figure out how we can deal with this incredible financial hurdle that we find ourselves faced with? So on Kickstarter, you all of your money raised has to go toward supporting a creative project. So they couldn't just raise funds as like a fundraiser for operating expenses. Instead, they framed the campaign around their 2024 season of books. They were able to raise over £300,000, and this was going to be enough to help them produce all of the books that they were planning to publish this year and sort of offset all of these other sudden financial issues that they were facing. Test out an ambitious idea. This is one of my very favorite projects by any publisher. Rough Trade Press, also in the UK. They call this an immersive publication, which is a little bit twee, but I think somewhat reasonable. It's not actually a book, it's a box of typewritten pages and is all designed as a pay-on to the movie The Shining. So in addition to a lot of historical and sort of critical essays, the box itself is patterned after the wallpaper of the Overlook Hotel. They have key fobs, they have little zines, they have photos, they have all kinds of other stuff in the box. Shelley Duvall and many of the other stars from the movie were also involved. I can imagine a publishing meeting with a project like this and trying to put together a P&L that says, well, this is such a wild idea that if we don't sell all the copies that we're hoping to, we could bankrupt the company. So coming to Kickstarter, where you can get your money up front and assess the print run based on audience interest, is a far smarter way for a small press to do something wild like this. And it worked beautifully. They raised over £70,000 from more than 800 backers. Connect directly with your readers. Another of my favorite recent campaigns. The Feminist Press, they were already going to be publishing The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy, which is a sort of coming of age novel about trans witches. They use this campaign to offset printing costs, but also to fund and shape a book tour by the author. Their previous campaign they had used to fund publication as well as a launch party for their book Out of the Closet, which was essays by queer writers on horror movies that had changed their lives. And so this one was much more focused on one author and her journey. I believe their initial goal for this campaign was $15,000. They got 55,000. And so they had assumed that Margaret would do a small, I think, 4-city book tour in the Northeast where she lives. Instead, they were able to expand it all the way across the country, add extra rewards, little bonus things for all the backers, and just turn this into a really huge event. I think this might have been the largest initial print run that Feminist Press has ever made for a book. So very successful. You can use Kickstarter to uplift marginalized voices. This was Copper Canyon's book with Jericho Brown. It was a book of a collection of his poetry, but also a sort of dialogue was put into it. There was a lot of discussion questions and sort of analysis and annotations and things like that. Publishers, there has long been in the publishing industry, we spoke at the beginning about gatekeeping. Books that are considered to be niche or books with uplifting marginalized voices have long been sort of ignored by the traditional industry. And so Kickstarter is a great place for you to demonstrate that, yes, there is an audience for poetry by Black men, for graphic novels about lesbians on the moon, for books about, the food, history, culture, and language of all different sorts of countries and cultures, and to connect with that audience right there on the platform. Demystifying the publishing process. You will obviously hear from Kim much more about this book. But one of the things that I was so struck by with Kim's projects is not only the project itself, but all of her backer updates throughout the course of the campaign give so much detail and color to what exactly goes into publishing a book. The publishing industry and print production broadly is vastly opaque. It's really complicated. And so, being able to share with your readers, with your audience, with your supporters, here are the actual steps. Here is how, you get a book printed. Here's what it's like to start a publishing company, an independent press in Canada. It's really thrilling. It's thrilling for your readers, and I think for you to get to share that with your people. And then creating something new with your IP. So this is AK Press's Lineage of Change tarot deck. We are seeing a lot of tarot decks from prominent authors. We're also seeing a lot of games. We're seeing RPGs, we're seeing tabletop games. People are also thinking of even more strange sorts of things to do. We've seen literary inspired chocolate bars, scarves and other accessories, enamel pins based on characters, books of maps. So, using the creative assets that you have already developed, thinking about other things that you can make with them and coming to Kickstarter to bring those things to life can be a really, an excellent path. So now I will go over just some sort of top line basics about how to run a campaign. I don't know, I'm sure people have various knowledge levels of how the site actually works, so we can get into more of this in the Q&A session if you'd like to. Very top line, the first thing you need to do when you're making a campaign is define your idea and identify your audience. That seems simple, but it's pretty crucial work. Are you making one book? Are you doing a series of books? Are you doing a season, a box set, a scarf, a chocolate bar, whatever it is that you're doing? Make sure you know the real parameters of what that actually is, and also who is likely to be the most interested in it, and start thinking about how you're going to reach them. Um, Budgeting is critical everywhere, but it's especially so on Kickstarter. You want to actually absolutely make sure that you understand all of the associated costs with the thing that you're making. And that's not just print production, but also shipping, also taxes, also any rewards that you're going to be producing physically, what costs are associated with that. As I said at the beginning, you want to make sure that you will not be tasked with bringing this project to life without enough money to do so. So make sure that you know what all of your costs are going to be, build in a buffer, etc. Start to connect with your audience and share your plans. Very broadly, if you have an audience that's not as familiar with Kickstarter, the sort of 1, 2, 3 method that we recommend is warm them up first about the project itself. Guess what? We're publishing this new book. We're making this tarot deck. We're doing this cool thing. Isn't that awesome? Stay tuned for more. In the meantime, make your Kickstarter project draft, and then you can activate a pre-launch page, which is designed to help you collect followers. Once you have that up, go back to your audience and say, hey, that project that you were already stoked about, we're doing it on Kickstarter. Here's the link. Press this button, follow the page to be notified when we launch and be one of the first ones to have access to all of the cool stuff that we're doing. That way, you're encouraging people to remove those barriers to entry. They'll make their account, they'll get ready, and they'll get excited, so that when you launch, they will be ready, to jump right on board. We see a very high conversion from pre-launch followers to project backers, and they tend to do it right away. So it's a terrific way to have a strong start to your campaign. Um, Design your campaign page. Perhaps I should have reversed this order anyway. Campaign page is both very simple and can be sort of as complex as you want it to be. You're going to have a title, subtitle, a project image, a project video, should you want to do one, and then your story section where you can be as long or short-winded as you choose. I come from journalism, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention keep the most important information up top. You cannot guarantee that everybody will read all the way down the page. So do everything you can to make sure they're hooked right at the top. And then those that want to can continue on and see everything else that you'd like to share with them. We recommend your pre-launch phase take about 2 weeks. I've seen campaigns run pre-launch for months, a couple of times for over a year, but I think in the best case, this works as a sort of crescendo into the burst of your launch. And the longer you have that, the less people will remember that this was something they were excited about. We recommend running campaigns for about a month, so about 30 days, 4 weeks, something in there. Most of your action will happen the first and the last week, but we recommend, especially at the beginning in your early campaigns, having that space in the middle to just give everything time to fully come to fruition. And then you get to produce and ship your beautiful books. Shoot, I forgot that I had this part. Well, I guess I've already gone through much of this, but here are the main elements of your Kickstarter project page, your video, your story section, your rewards, and then stretch goals. Um, I guess I'll just mention quickly top tips for the video. It should be short, bright, and compelling. Most people will stop watching after the first minute. Kickstarter is not really the place for 15-minute high production value Hollywood style videos. A short teaser is really all you need. I already talked about the project page. The rewards, I know I have a slide at the end that's a sort of rewards brainstorm. I'll just sort of touch quickly on the way we think about rewards. Of course, the main thing that you're going to be offering is the thing your campaign is funding, which is again a book, a series of books, a chocolate bar, etc. But think about what you can build above and below that that will be really exciting to your audience. Below your main tier, we generally recommend not to do too much physical items. Digital rewards are fine. You don't want to saddle yourself with a lot of shipping logistics for, bookmarks and stickers. Above your main tier, that's where you can get really creative and start to add strange and wonderful things. Again, this can be swag, but it doesn't have to be. People do like bookmarks and stickers, but Kickstarter gives you a unique opportunity to say, write somebody into the story or to do high-end prints of your book cover art or interiors or things like that. There are lots and lots and lots of rewards that will be unexpected, that will be unique to the work that you're doing, and that will be really, really thrilling to your audience. And then a word about stretch goals. Once people hit their base reward or their base goal, sorry, you can announce further goals. This is really like a semantics. I've said that Kickstarter is all or nothing. So if you say you're going to raise 5,000, you need to raise that to get any of your money. If you then say, well, if we raise 2,000 more dollars, we're going to add a ribbon bookmark or a full color photo insert. You don't have to hit that goal to get all your money. Once you've hit the base goal, you're getting everything from there. Stretch goals just allow you a good excuse for more promotion to get people excited about another thing that you're doing, and also the ability to improve the thing you're making as you raise more money in order to do so. Yes, here's my rewards brainstorm. This is just a few little things, and I won't read the whole list. I will instead say the best way to find out what rewards will work on Kickstarter is to look at Kickstarter. I'm an expert on this platform because I stare at it all day long. You too can stare at Kickstarter all day long. You can view this historical repository of everything that's ever happened on the site. And I also strongly recommend backing some campaigns, even just for $1, so you can start to get a sense of what people do, how they run their projects, their tone, their frequency of updates, things like that. And that would be a way to find out what other people have done for rewards and what else you could do on your own. So finding your crowd, because, the biggest predictor of crowdfunding success is figuring out where your people are and how to reach them. Um, Kickstarter will help, but I would say the average. So in your creator dashboard on Kickstarter, we track what percentage of your backers are coming through your efforts and which through the Kickstarter audience. A publishing project on average, about 15 to 35% of your backers will be coming just from being on Kickstarter. So that's significant. We will help you grow your audience, but we can't do it all. You need to bring your people first. Kickstarter's algorithm works on attention. So the more people you can bring, the more people who are clicking, backing, commenting, interacting with your page, the more people are platform will show it to beyond that, exposing you to a larger audience of just existing Kickstarter backers. So start with your people, start with your newsletters, start with your socials, anything that you that access that you already have to your supporters, and utilize those as much as you can. I talked about the larger Kickstarter community. Again, we have most of that exposure is algorithmic. We also have our own newsletters, social platforms, etc. We have a promotions team who manually selects all of those. Part of my job that is very cool is I get to make recommendations about projects in my category. So we will, as I said, help expose you to folks who don't know that they're your fan yet. You'll also want to look into signal boosters and amplifiers. This is other folks who have audiences that are adjacent to yours. It doesn't necessarily need to be influencers, although if you have friends of that ilk, might as well go ahead and utilize those. But anybody who can help you spread the word farther, whether that's with their podcast, on their Instagram Live, through their media outlet, whatever levers they've got. Traditional and new media, much the same. Press releases can work. Getting press can be nice. Getting new media attention can also be excellent, particularly if your audience is somewhat niche and they are, say, all on Reddit or exclusively on Facebook groups, whatever it is that can, help you find them. And then a quick word on performance and digital marketing. This is essentially paid advertising. I have heard this is very hit or miss in books specifically. Folks who are crowdfunding for like gadgets and games tend to get a lot of traction with paid ads. I would be very careful if you have an existing ad strategy that involves paid advertising, or if you work with PR agencies, I think it can be great. But beware throwing a lot of money at digital marketing for crowdfunding for the first time if you're not sure that you know how effective it will be. I'm almost done. Here are my platform trends. The biggest growth areas in Kickstarter publishing right now, special and deluxe editions are at the top. For many of the reasons that I've gone over throughout this presentation, special and deluxe editions are very, very well suited to the Kickstarter proposition. You have the sort of exclusivity only available during this campaign, the FOMO, they're beautiful, artistic, they're strange, they're not the kind of thing that people would go shopping for at a regular bookstore. So we're seeing they've been growing. And also, of course, this is much bigger than Kickstarter. This is the sort of TikTokization of book publishing, but we're seeing it hold very strongly on our platform. Similarly, romance and romantasy have been growing in pretty tremendous leaps and bounds. I should have this to hand. I think in 2021, we had something like $400,000 pledged toward romance projects. And last year, we had almost 6 million. So that growth has been wild, also mirroring larger publishing trends. Sci-fi and fantasy have always been quite strong on Kickstarter, and lately we're seeing a big uptick in lit RPG. If that's not something you're familiar with, we don't have to get into it. I don't know whether there's going to be lit RPGers in this crowd, but that's going to be a big focus area for me next year. I see that as a big, strong area of growth. And thought leadership and nonfiction generally, that is such a vast area. That I think there are a lot of small inroads within. I think any thought leader at this point in time has also got to be strong at digital marketing and building their audience. So that seems like an excellent area where you can leverage all of that work that you're already doing to bring people to Kickstarter to fund your books. Um, some new platform features that we have released this year. We have completely revamped our text editor, so it's much easier to input all of your information in your story section, add photos and GIFs and various things like that. We've expanded our pre-launch pages, which I've mentioned, so you can now include a lot more copy and imagery on those. We now have late pledges. This is a way to capture interest after a campaign has closed. I can go into more detail about this if we want. I think I'm probably already over my time. So I'll just say we recommend for late pledges that you do not offer everything from the campaign, and that what you do offer, you increase the prices because you don't want to undermine that sort of like all or nothing, now or never intensity of the Kickstarter kind of value prop. And we've got a streamlined backer survey, so it's much more easy to get all the information you need for your fulfillment from your backers. And then here are the things that we're working on for next year. A full suite of pledge management tools. That's all the stuff that happens after your campaign is done. Pledge over time, which is like a payment plan. It's going to be our version of that. I think, again, for stuff like special editions, this is going to be a really big deal. We're going to be working on helping creators figure out tax and VAT collection. And we have an in-house, it's very nascent right now, performance marketing team that will be growing and scaling their work in the coming months. That is my presentation. I will unshare and turn it over to Kim.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen now. And I will no longer be able to see Zoom. So I apologize about that. But hello, thank you so much, Oriana. It's always exciting to share Zoom time with you. I'm going to very briefly bring the publisher perspective and tell you about our small press and also really focus on the very first Kickstarter campaign that we ran. So 910 Publications is a startup niche press. Sorry, I need to move. There's all kinds of Zoom in front of my screen. My background is in craft publishing, and I have worked for over 20 years exclusively with with American publishers, because that is where the niche of craft publishing exists. And we started 910, my business partner and I, in 2020 with that audacious idea of, well, maybe there's no niche craft press in Canada just because nobody has started one yet. Like, what a naive and audacious plan. But to our knowledge, there is no other publisher in Canada working exclusively within this niche. And you can see in my slide that we publish nonfiction Canadian works and works of interest to Canadians about how to make things and how things are made. And by American standards, that's an exceptionally broad niche. By Canadian standards, it seems incredibly narrow. So we launched 910 in the fall of 2020 with an online magazine called Digits and Threads, which is about Canadian fiber and textile arts and crafts. Sadly, the magazine is winding down as my business partner is leaving the company for personal reasons. But I want to talk a little bit about this because we launched Digits and Threads pretty much by crowdfunding our first year's editorial budget. We invited people to join as members of the magazine before we had even published an article. And we were able to do that because both my business partner and I had longstanding careers in crafts. We already had an audience to do that. It also established the way that we communicated with our audience transparently. We brought those founding members along and promised that we would tell them how it was going as we started our business and as the magazine that they helped to fund got off the ground. So then about a year later, we were finally ready to start looking into making books. And this is where my business partner and I kind of diverged. She took on the magazine. I started working on books. And just a background, right? Craft books are expensive to make. They're full color. They often involve work that rockets up production costs, like photo shoots and technical editing on top of copy editing and proofreading and all of those other costs. So when it came time to sort out how on earth we would pay to make our first book from scratch, we needed to get creative. And I looked to the experience we had launching Digits and Threads and said, well, how can we bring people on board ahead of time and see if we can get things done that way? And a note kind of related to what Oriana had said about spending a lot of time on Kickstarter. I didn't, but what I did do was happen to stumble upon a Kickstarter campaign by a small press out of Toronto. And I did something I don't usually do. I cold emailed the managing editor of that press. I didn't expect to hear back from her, but I reached out and was like, I'm considering using Kickstarter for our first book. I'd love to chat. And to my delight and my shock, she got back to me and spent an hour on Zoom with me. And she walked me through their experiences, and they were a repeat user of crowdfunding. And then she did something truly magnificent, which was she introduced me to Oriana. I didn't know at the time that there's a whole team of humans who support creators on Kickstarter. And so meeting Oriana was a game changer for me. especially because she was so enthusiastic about our book. She helped me flesh out how I would present the campaign. She read through the draft of our campaign before we launched it. And she kept assuring me that like this was not a small campaign. We didn't need to raise $5,000 in order to make our first full color book on recycled paper printed in Canada. We needed to raise a minimum of $25,000. And she was like, Kim, your book about sheep and wool in Canada is like the stuff of Kickstarter gold. And I took it on faith and I believed her. So here is a bit more about the book. Anna Hunter, the author, is a sheep farmer and wool mill operator in Manitoba, who, in addition to raising and marketing wool, is extremely active working with other small-scale wool producers in Canada to reinvigorate our domestic industry. The book is composed of interviews she did with small-scale sheep farmers from the Maritimes all the way out to BC. And she traveled to each farm along with her best friend and professional photographer, Christelle Lancier, who is herself also a sheep farmer. Anna had run a couple of successful Kickstarters in the past to fund aspects of getting her farm off the ground. So she was the perfect author to partner with us for our first crowdfunding effort. She knew exactly what was involved. And we planned for several months. We started in the fall of 2021. And in April of 2022, we launched the month-long campaign to raise $25,000 to produce Sheep, Shepherd, and Land. I had a marketing plan for the 30 days of the campaign. I had image assets. I had quotes and anecdotes from the author and photographer to share both publicly and to the backers who were already coming onto the campaign as we ran it. I was prepared to contingency plan halfway through if it looked like we might not reach our goal. And the one thing I did not plan for was that we would reach our goal less than 48 hours after we launched the campaign. Not to like set your sights on this being normal. Neither of the subsequent two campaigns that we have run funded this quickly, but it was like I just ended up chasing this campaign from the time that we launched it. People were here for the sheep and wool. Oriana knew what she was talking about. And I'm so glad that I listened to her about it. But you can see from this slide, this is a screenshot from the kind of dashboard at the end of our campaign. We ended up raising $45,000 on this $25,000 campaign. And that's a very good thing, because initially that $25,000 was for the print run alone, but this book did cost over $40,000 to produce. And the success of this campaign meant that we did not go into debt as a startup press at any point. Here's why I think it worked. And a lot of these aspects touch on what Oriana already talked about. So this was a niche topic. It was very, very specific. And it wasn't a coincidence that this was the first book we decided to make, because the topic dovetailed so well with the magazine audience we had already been cultivating. And so in the case of Sheep, Shepherd, and Land, our identified audience were crafters who work with wool, knitters who dream of quitting it all and becoming a sheep farmer, which is more people than you might think, and people who are interested in eco-conscious Canadian industry and how sort of a very passionate person can get a lot of really good work done by organizing. We had an experienced author, as I already mentioned, both with Kickstarter and with telling her story. She speaks and teaches, and so she was able to present the value of this campaign really well to her own audience. Our commitment to transparency that we had already established really well with our magazine enabled us to bring backers along for the journey. So we were already used to pulling back the curtain and sharing the highs and the lows. When things go wrong, we're completely comfortable telling people why they went wrong, apologizing for it if that's needed, and moving on and learning from it, sorry. We had gorgeous visuals. The book's photographs were stunning, and so we used them to show backers what they would be getting, both on the campaign page, also through backer updates, and then on social media and as we promoted the campaign as it was running. Great storytelling. So not only was the author great at telling the story of why this book was so important, but I would like to say that my own marketing chops are in long form storytelling. And so I loved that, and I didn't ask her to, but I loved that Oriana highlighted our backer updates. To me, that is the heart of why it's so special to use crowdfunding to create our books, because I get to tell the story not only of an individual book to our readers, but also what's it like to run a small press? What's it like to start up a press from scratch? All of those kinds of things enables us to really form solid relationships with our readers. And then finally, aligned values. We are committed to printing our books on recycled paper, the most expensive paper you can possibly use. We're committed to printing domestically, which is way more expensive than printing overseas. We work with authors who understand that that makes it more challenging for us to make our books because they're way more expensive than they would be if we compromise those values. And we are able to attract an audience who wants to know that the money they're spending is helping products be made in a manner that aligns with their values. And so here's why we did it again and again. We've now run 3 successful Kickstarters. We have one planned for 2025 and another already for 2026. By the time our books are released to market, they are fully or mostly paid for. We are not having to scramble to ensure an absolute magnificent launch, which is very hard to do as a startup press where we don't have the network of PR. We don't even have sales representation yet in Canada, let alone in the US. So we launch our books almost risk-free. But it does enable us to start up. So as a startup, we're hustling hard to establish all of that infrastructure that will give us a shot at making it. But crowdfunding our books means we don't have to rely on having it yet in order to get off the ground. As I said, we establish real engagement with our readers. Our readers are not just social media numbers or sales data. They're individuals who want to pick up what we're putting down. And engaging with them helps us make better books because it helps us know what they want and what little specific niche that they're passionate about isn't yet being addressed by publishers. And it's a proof of concept, which was related to all of these other things. But we make our riskiest books, these books that cost upwards of $40,000 a piece to make, knowing that enough readers want them, that they're willing to pay for them over a year in advance, and sometimes more than what the list price will end up being. So these are some of our other books. Gathering Color was our second Kickstarter. Custom Fit Hats was not a Kickstarter. So what Kickstarter is enabling us to do is launch with these very splashy, beautiful full color books, but also then establish the cash flow that enables us to make lower production value, much less expensive black and white books. And Quilting is the Kickstarter that we will be fulfilling. The book goes to print next month and it will be released in February. So I would love to keep talking. I went a tiny bit over time. I would love to, I know there's time for Q&A, but I want to leave this slide up for a second because it's really hard to connect with other startups and small presses in Canada because many of us, especially in the early years, don't qualify to join trade organizations. And I think it's silly that it's so hard for us to connect with each other. I think there's so much we could do to support each other and learn from each other. So if you scan that QR code, it's like an email sign up. It'll just give us a way to connect with each other that I'm hoping some of you fall into this category. If you're here looking at crowdfunding, I hope you do. I would love to connect. Also, my email address, our web address, and then that link pop link is all of our social media and everything on it. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And here we are.
That was amazing. Thank you both. I can see the questions coming up in the chat already. So for anybody watching, if there's anything you'd like to ask Oriana or Kim, please go ahead and use the Q&A box. I'm going to start with just 2 quick questions that we had for you. For Kim, looking back on your Kickstarter journey and your past projects, what's it'll probably be hard to limit it to one, but what's one piece of advice that you would give a publisher preparing to launch their first campaign?
I would say ask around, reach out to me. You now know somebody who has run a Kickstarter. I would be happy to hear from you and to pay forward what that other managing editor gave me. It really can't hurt to find out what has worked and not worked for other publishers. And then I would be happy to introduce you to Oriana, which was a game changer for me because she knows this platform the best, but she also has a background in publishing. So you don't have to explain to her what the factors are, or what's challenging, or what's going on. She knows and is there to help. And so I would say reach out, ask questions. No question is a dumb question. They're all really good questions, especially as you're sorting out how to go about doing this.
And I would just add, even though that question wasn't for me, you don't have to find Kim to find me. I am findable. I have a weird name and I'm extremely online. I'm only because this is recorded, not going to spell out my email address, but you can find me. Yeah, that's fine. And then also I will just emphasize, like for publishers, for anybody, back campaigns, look at other campaigns, really like steal all the best ideas and make them your own. That's the best way to learn how to do anything.
Agreed.
Great. Oriana, I'll continue with you. Kim pointed out that you publishing and those factors. And then would you be able to, off the top of your head, share what maybe those top 3 factors are that would, make or break a campaign on Kickstarter?
I think the number one most important thing is making sure that your ambition matches your reach. This is different for everyone, and I cannot answer this question for you. I do this talk to authors generally, so publishers are slightly better, I think, at being self-aware and answering these questions, but deciding what you need to make, figuring out the thing that you're making and how much it's going to cost, that's your ambition. Your reach is your audience doing an honest assessment of who already exists in your community, what your avenues are to get beyond that. And if those things don't match, you need to reconsider one of them. You need to scale back the project, fund a smaller part of it. You need to wait, maybe take some time to grow your audience, build your community, etc. Yeah, I think that is like number one. People come to me and they're like, well, in my story section, should I have my bio first or the plot of the book? They get really like worked up and wrapped around the axle about their project image and this, like, that stuff matters. You should make the loveliest campaign page you can, but knowing how to reach your crowd, understanding what you're doing and whether it's possible for you, that's really the biggest predictor of crowdfunding success.
Thanks. That's great. For Kim, Oriana mentioned the first thing is to pretty much to get your existing audience on board and excited for your project. What did you find was the best way to then carry that excitement or get your audience to actually fund Kickstarter? Was it newsletters or social media? Like, do you remember any one particular thing that kind of really made the difference?
Yeah, so that first campaign was a blur. It went so hard, so fast. But I will say that we used that pre-launch feature that Oriana mentioned in her presentation. It was new at the time, and I was so excited that she told me about it. So we did start to tease the campaign ahead of time, and we launched the campaign with, I want to say, just over 100 people following it before it launched, which is how, like, 8 seconds after we launched the campaign, pledges started coming in. There was so much momentum. Now, that said, we've used the same feature on our subsequent 2 campaigns, and it didn't go that same way. Yes, some people did back it right away, but there was like explosive growth for Sheep, Shepherd, and Land. I was almost disappointed that the campaign went that way because there was nothing I could learn from it. The other 2 campaigns, there was like, okay, I could see there was time. What did I do? Which social media posts got traction and which ones didn't? Did my email newsletter send more people to the campaign, or did Instagram? Sheep, Shepherd, and Land went so fast. I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. It was magic. It was weird. And it was terrifying when we launched our second campaign because we knew it would never go that way again. Things that were the most successful to us was just experimenting and trying, because each book has a slightly different audience. Our third book was a quilting book. I learned a lot about how the quilt market is different from the fiber and wool market. They're not really there for what I'm putting out. They do not want the long form backer updates. They don't care how to make a book. They just want their book and they want to know about quilting, which is really excellent for me. But if you go to our Kickstarter account and you see our current quilting page, there are not those really lengthy behind the scenes updates, because I'm told they're boring and long, like TLDR, which fine. Oh, that's okay. Anyway, no, I don't have a clear answer to that question, but I would say that because each campaign is different, you got to try everything, because you never can quite predict what will land with people and where.
Yeah, for sure. Have you had any projects that did not get funded? I think you said you've had 3 successful campaigns, which is amazing.
Yeah, I've had 3 successful campaigns. The second campaign, we put more of a realistic goal in. We learned so much making our first book. Our second campaign goal was $35,000. We knew that was much closer to what we needed to make that book. And we raised 52. We did that. The author for that book is a practicing pagan. We launched that book when Kickstarter was doing a site-wide themed thing in October called, what was it called? Witchstarter. Which the author was there for. This was her audience in a way that it was not my audience. And we met with someone at Kickstarter whose jam was everything witchy in preparation for that. So that helped to amplify that campaign during that themed month, but it was a slower going campaign. So we worked harder throughout. And then our last campaign was for the quilt book. And we did something different with this one. We used an outside pledge manager, which is helping me now that the campaign is over. I have learned a lot through this experience. I'm not sure I would do it again, but because we were able to separate out shipping costs from collecting those costs on Kickstarter, it was different. So before that, any shipping costs associated with a reward were collected as a part of your campaign and counted toward your campaign goal. So when we raised $45,000 for Sheep, Shepherd, and Land, $8,000 of that 45 was for shipping. Mm-hmm. So even though that book cost over $40,000 to make, but we really only brought in, I believe it was about $31,000 less shipping and fees for that campaign. So that was fine. We were able to swing that. But with the pledge manager for quilting, there were some challenges there in the finances didn't come in the same way I had been used to them. And I knew that and I was prepared for that. But anyway, no, we have not failed yet. It is entirely a possibility down the line. As our press gets more established, there's less risk to us. There will be other ways that we'll be able to finance a book because we have revenue now, and because as we grow and gain other distribution channels, hopefully that revenue will continue to grow. That's the idea. But no.
I love Witchstarter. That's amazing.
It was amazing.
One question from the audience. Kim, this is awesome information. How do you work it with the author contract and the funding for the book? Do your campaigns include author royalties?
Okay, so how we work it with our contracts. I wish I should have read a contract just to refresh my memory before I came. So we offer, we operate with a slightly different than usual author contract anyway. We do not pay in advance to our authors. Part of what crowdfunding enables us to do is we just pay them outright, a very modest upfront payment. So not a ton of money, but we don't require them to earn that back before they start earning royalties. They do not earn royalties on books that are sold through crowdfunding. They do earn royalties on pre-orders after the fact and on every book that is sold from the time the book is released. So with this quilting book, the Kickstarter ended. Those 600 books that sold during the Kickstarter do not earn the author royalties, but the 65 books that have been pre-ordered so far through the pledge manager that we're using will earn them royalties. And then once the book is released, they earn royalties from there. So a part of the budget that we put together for our books is an initial author payment that is not borrowed against their future royalties. We also, because we're a tiny press, I always talk to my authors. We have a lot of conversations about the business of publishing with a tiny, tiny startup press. They know I don't have distribution in America yet. They know I don't have sales representation in Canada yet. They know I'm hustling hard to establish those things. But I really walk them through the downsides of working with an early stage publisher versus trying to sign with a larger publisher. But then there are upsides as well. We work really closely together. They get to build on their own audience and build that professional relationship with their readers as much as we do. So there's all of those kinds of things as well. But that's the nitty gritty of the contract. And I'd be happy to share with you the contract language that we have and that we use if you want to follow up with me by email.
Great. Amazing. Thanks, Kim. We've got about 5 minutes left, so let's try and squeeze in maybe 1 or 2 questions. For Oriana, can you give us a sense, you've already spoken quite a bit about this, but give us a sense of how Kickstarter supports publishers throughout their campaigns?
Yeah, so first of all, there's me. I am the whole publishing category at Kickstarter. I do want to sort of emphasize that. And I am but one woman. There are about 150 projects launching in my category every week. So I am given very broad leeway to decide how I spend my time. But I cannot always work as closely with everyone as I worked with Kim, for example. Anyone on this call or seeing this recording, if you find me, I will answer you. I will happily look over your project page before you launch it. I will answer a few questions. If, the stars align, I'll get on a call with you. Yeah, it just really depends sort of like when you catch me. I also travel a lot. I'm making my 2025 budget right now, and there are 14 different conferences I may or may not go. We'll see. We'll see. I'm just budgeting for them in case I can make it. Anyway, yeah, so that's what I can do. Kickstarter has a really broad network of readers, and they're interesting readers. Kickstarter backers are not as price sensitive as, your sort of standard bookstore buyers. They're really like into the sort of the cult of personality that comes. They want to hear the story. They're interested in the books, obviously, but like also, supporting the press. I mean, I think this is a good time for small presses to be reconnecting or deepening those connections with their audiences, just like the way the world is a bit crazy right now. Yeah, so I think Kickstarter as a mechanism helps publishers in that way. And then, as I said, I mean, we're really we have two big newsletters which have the readership in the low millions that go out every week. I have a monthly publishing newsletter. There's all sorts of like push notifications and social boosts and things like that. Like we really are trying to elevate projects all the time. And also our whole site is like user reactive. So like if you are on there backing a bunch of gadgets, you won't be bothered with like beautiful books about wool. But if you're there for the books, you're going to see more books and like, a lot of we have a ton of like super backers on Kickstarter. Many people come because their friend sent them a link. They back one campaign, they never look at the site again. But if they back another one within a couple of months and another one, then they're sort of hooked. It's really fun. I am a super backer. We joke all the time about how all the staff should just have our paychecks redirected back into the site because once you get into it, it is so thrilling to feel like you're supporting creativity, to get all these wonderful rewards. Yeah, so I don't know. That's how we support publishers, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Oriana and Kim, and everybody for joining us today. Before we go, we'd love it if you could provide feedback on this session. We'll drop a link to the survey in the chat. Please take a couple of minutes to fill it out. And we'll also be emailing you all a link to a recording of this session as soon as it's available. To our attendees, we invite you to check our website in mid-December for the release of a pre-recorded session on common metadata issues and how to fix them. Also join us for our next live webinar, Unlocking the European Market, Preparing to Comply with the European Accessibility Act, scheduled for January 21st. You can register through the link we'll be dropping in the chat. Find information about all upcoming events and recordings of previous sessions on our website, bnctechforum.ca. Lastly, we'd like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage for their support through the Canada Book Fund, and thanks to you all for attending.
Thank you for having
Thank
me. This
you.
was so fun.